Well, hello everyone. Here to show you that the health of life, coloring activities, for World for You, and basically that you see right here is I went ahead and drew this activity right here, is that most of us have experience. Of course, is like so far as it's like that type of a say health concern of knowing about between panic attacks and of course anxiety attacks. It is, and most of the time though that anybody maybe think about that knowing about what they mean a lot of times and I kept thinking about that. And I can tell anybody here that one time my teacher was, back in 1994, used to think about that when those told me those couple of years ago that she remembers seeing a big red dog, of course, in the backyard. Kind of like Clifford. It was a big red dog in the backyard, and I kept thinking about that. What is she talking about? It was, and I can remember that. After that, and then I can just recall about the fact about that knowing about really how did I get in this world. It was, and at the time though that anybody may be thinking about it's like to over that story to where the fact about the health of life of knowing about that since then that time say from elementary school was, and of course this was the house of course I used to live at whenever I was young it was, and knowing about the details I went and drew for that, and knowing about that if most of us have experienced of course what's like maybe to have like we say a type of anxiety attack or a type of panic attack, any type of worries or concerns it was. A lot of times we may wonder about exactly about what does it mean a lot of times, and I kept thinking about that. A lot of my words like talking about if anybody knows the feeling about feeling lightheaded or any type of nausea or anything like that, or it's like the fact about that you. That I guess if it's all the fact about in the nerve system, it is that a couple of times though that if you feel say that you feel like maybe your body it's like maybe losing a little bit of energy. It is, but I don't know if anybody knows exactly what I'm talking about exactly. But talk about with the health of life though, about talk about for World for You. It is knowing about that I keep thinking about almost every day about that when what life was like before I was born. It was before I was born that what life was like, and I kept thinking about maybe my parents. It was that from the house of course that we were living at. It was knowing about that talking about that I know with most of the time that we probably think about whenever the parents go through an ultrasound test. It is, and they find out, oh, it's a boy or it's a girl. It is, and I kept thinking about what was I before I was conceived? Before I was born, what type of living species was I before I was brought into the world? And with most kids, they would probably thinking about that. I'm wondering about that. I'm like, before I became, of course, before I was born to be a human being, that what was I before that? And anybody maybe think about, well, it's all a matter about the thing about birth. It was. It's always all a matter of fact about say the health of for you and knowing about that for whenever you were brought into the world. It was is that talk about it's like for how you would say how you were created. How you were born. It is, and a lot of times though that we all may be thinking about that, about maybe how we were brought into the world. It was. It's like right here's the details. Right here's the stars. And between, like, say, from the time you were born, and then, of course, from the leaves, of course, it will represent, it's like the seasons, or maybe the thing that, of course, that you may have touched. It's like the things that maybe you touched whenever you were very young, it was, and talk about the whole point, of course, about life, it was, and then that from whenever you were brought into the world, and then, of course, from whenever you go out and and go out into the community and for a job interview. It is, but a lot of times though, anybody maybe think about a lot of times that are you one of maybe of those few thousands of other people that maybe experience maybe panic attacks and anxiety attacks? And I could tell anybody here that a lot of times though that a lot of times how do I usually get away from how do I get rid of them? And a lot of times I usually think about getting my mind on something else, because a lot of them are faced on the fact about with the amount of stress I guess that we face. It is, and knowing about that if a lot of things that are going on, and like talking about, you go from you go from home to work, and you kind of seem rushed around, and maybe that you had that part to where maybe all your energy is not all there, that with the from how your body's working, is that maybe if you're half asleep and half awake, and I find out with being rushed around a lot, and a lot of times that you kind of get that feeling to where that if you feel that maybe that you're half there and then half into dreamland, with whichever you want to call it. But a lot of times I keep thinking about that so far as the health of life, and exactly about what about panic attacks, or about anxiety attacks it is. But anybody maybe think about that a lot of times about really what is the world made out of, whichever it is, or if it's about how you know about what's going to happen at this time, if it's a job interview, or you're gonna did you get the job, whichever it is. But right here, though, is basically what I would have to say about this activity right here of knowing about that I often think about is like that yeah, that for knowing about who created, of course, the earth, who created the universe. It is like, so far as God is like talk about right here of knowing about that anybody maybe think about, it's like maybe from, let's say, what the Bible says it is, and knowing about say for how life, of course, was created. And I could probably tell anybody here that it seems like at the time that we were created, of course, whenever a man and a woman, say, whenever two couples get together, and of course they decided they want to have children, it is, or something like that, and it's like yeah, at the time I begin to wonder about really about what exactly was I before. Before I came into this world, like at the time, and anybody made me think about, unless if you're talking about any type of soulmate, is it talking about that, maybe if you were what you calls like if you were a star at one time, if you were any type of star, you say at one time, until all of a sudden, maybe if you were, any type of a blossom, any type of a, anybody maybe think about, too exaggerated, but anyway, draw right here, go ahead and draw right here, maybe in crayon it is, and it's like you got so many art utensils to work with at the moment, but anyway, that you have right here is like I say is a flower, and anybody made me think about, hey, I'm like, exactly what was I? What was I before I was born? It was, and anybody made like that. Anybody made me think about, you were no tulip on a stick, or and you were. You were no, you say the impacalo seed or anything like that. It's like sprinkled with a tablespoon of sugar or anything like that. Basically talking about anybody with any parents maybe thinking about that. What are you going to tell your kids of knowing about? I can talk about what life it is. If like anybody maybe ask, it's like what's at the end of space? It is what's at the end of space, or how why, how were we born? And what is heaven? Stuff like that. It is, and I could tell anybody here that we tend to wonder about how was it? How did this get here? How did that get here? How did we get here? It is, and a lot of times though, I keep thinking about, people may think about between yes or no answer, and then maybe explain. If this was like a school project, it is, I could probably think about that particular life science it was basically talking about, but knowing about from how children, of course, how children, came into the world, it was, of knowing about the fact about, it's like whenever, whenever, say, two couples, of course, whenever it's like talking about whenever they work it out to where that they can have children, it is, and then whenever they can, create a family of their own, it is the family brought to them, or do they have to go to the family? It is, and do they have to go get what they like to have or what they need to have, or does that particular thing it's like, does that particular reason need to come to them? It is, and I keep thinking about, say, for the world to you, it is, of knowing about that yeah, the best of ways, of course, it's like anybody made me think about, what do anxiety attacks and then panic attacks, any type of a medical reason attacks it is, such as heart attack or stroke or anything like that, a lot of times that we like wondering about, with most of the time. I'm like, yeah, what is the planet made out of? I'm like, I go digging in the ground, I go digging in the ground, and anybody made me wonder, I'm like, why was I digging in the ground for? I go digging in the ground, and at the time that somebody may have told me, of course, in science class, that you may find, of course, maybe the type of reason to why, maybe that, for that particular reason, we were born, of course, for a reason. It's like, to find, of course, what we were in the ground. The first, the person to find maybe exactly for where the water well, it's like, for the water, the cleanest water that you can find anywhere on the planet, or something like that. Find out what the world is made out of. Anybody maybe think about, find out what the world is made out of. More likely, it's like be able to find out, like, for how you were created. And I could tell anybody here, I used to dig in the ground, of course, a couple of times, but I'm like, I don't think I was, not necessarily just to find out about, what the world was made out of, maybe just to find something interesting. And with anybody, would think about that, if we would ask ourselves a question about maybe about how were we created, it is so far as talk about, say, the word, say, discover. For discover, say, for discover this or discover that, it is of knowing about that right here is knowing about the fact about, that if you were to discover maybe a secret island or maybe a secret cave or something like that, that's a couple times the teachers at the school would say that, something that nobody else has found it was. And I could maybe go ahead and maybe use, like we say, example right here of, and say maybe for Columbus Day it was, from I think Christopher Columbus, I think it was, back in, the year would have been about, 1782, something like that, whenever he discovered North America, it was, something like that. But anyway, but talking about right here, it's like anybody made me think about, that so far as you say the health of life, of knowing about that, ways of knowing about, anybody made me think about, really, where am I? How did I get in this world? It is, who am I? It is, really. Who are you? You're that somebody, of course, for how you were raised by. Knowing about, you are the child of the parent of who, and knowing about, the child of the parent of who, and with the parent of that somebody is, they raised you, of course, is to know about, to enjoy life, and then, of course, to get, it's like, maybe to think about it, it's like your future it is, and but anybody maybe think about, really, what is the world made out of? I can tell anybody here, the world is made out of possibilities. The world is made, of course, out of dreams. And maybe the world is made out of what you call, it's like concentrating, of course, of knowing about, when to say, of knowing about, to do the right thing it is. But on the other hand, too, anybody maybe think about that the world is made out of, maybe out of fear. And anybody maybe think about, that whenever we were born, it is, we may extremely curious about something it is, of knowing about, maybe if it's the grandma's, homemade biscuit or anything like that, or maybe peach cobbler cake or something like that. But on the other hand, too, knowing about, it's like with the leaves right here, if anybody maybe think about, we ought to think about that, as so far as the world to you, as so far as, say, that, the health of life, say, killing activity.